Good morning, everybody. I'm your host, Jedi Hill, where we're going to talk about how you can develop freedom from the mental, emotional, financial, time freedom, all these fun things. Today's special guest is a personal development coach and real estate investor, also an upcoming author, Rick Kansa. Thank you so much for being on today, Rick.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So, what got you into being a personal development coach?
I think what it started out was it started from personal experiences. When I was younger, I was quite ill and almost died, actually. And at that point in time, I think there was a wake-up call on, who am I? What am I doing with my life? And why am I still here? So I think maybe even in high school, I started studying. I was fascinated with why people do what they do. How do some people succeed? How some people don't? But I think it was certainly magnified at that point. And so as a result of that, I started off actually in medicine. I was going to be a physician assistant and decided that that probably, although I completed, I didn't quite feel the vibe for that. So I said, I really want to move on into psychology, and which I did at that point. And I thought, since I recovered from this traumatic experience, which really was a PTSD type of thing, I said, let me quite understand why I'm here, what I want to do. And so what I did is I went into psychology for a while. I worked with patients. I worked in psychiatric hospital for a while. And then I worked with employee assistant program. So I worked with pathology, and I also worked with basically what I would call human growth and development. And I was also fascinated with the mind as far as neuroscience. So I started studying a lot of that. And then it came to the point where I wanted to do something else with my life. And I became an entrepreneur, getting involved with real estate, because I didn't want to just work for people, which I did and enjoyed and had a great experience doing that. So I became a real estate investor. I did not know how that was going to happen. And I didn't know that a lot of people don't succeed at it. I never had that in my mind. I just really didn't. And 6 months after I got into it, I quit my job, and I thought, wow. And I did it for 11 years. And then what happened is a second life experience, a traumatic experience happened, where the market crashed at the same time my mother became terminally ill. So I had to reinvent myself, was the point. So I had to step back and say, who am I? What do I want with my life? And I think I'd really delved back into the personal development part and studied with many people. And then
Well, you make a good point there, having to take the time to reevaluate your life and what do I want to do? Who do I want to be? Is just a huge thing for people.
It is a huge thing for people. And I think, well, my experience working with people is oftentimes when they would come in to see me as a clinician, and even as a coach, is one of the things I ask them, what is it you want? And so the first thing we do is we talk about getting clarity on who you are. Now, people talk about that all the time, getting clarity. That's not a new concept. But what is new is how many people don't have that. They think they do. We sit down and we really flesh it out. And I think we were talking about our topic was about freedom. I think that the one of the things I focus on is, if you have the internal freedom, the mental, emotional freedom, then that is where you really start. And focusing on that, we could talk about the external world and all that, and those are other conversations. But I think what really was the best thing that ever worked for me, and as I studied people, worked with people, and still do, I see those individuals that have the freedom internally of being who they are, what they want, very clear on that. And how that all comes back and do is my program kind of revolves around that. I call it the Rewired. It's kind of the rewired mind. So the first thing is, if you want that kind of freedom in your life, you first have to identify, get clear on who you are and what you want. And that's actually a little bit of a process. And I often run into people that it's more common than not that they really don't know what they want or who they are. So it's a really fascinating experience.
Discovery for them. It's their discovery to figure out who they are so they can actually finally be authentic instead of just being a plastic puppet.
Exactly, plastic puppet. So I tell people, I said, basically, there's three things you're going to do. if you want to make the change, if you want to have this freedom, the first thing you need to do is you need to really get clear on who you are and what you want. We're going to sit down and we're going to do that. And that includes writing. That also includes some meditation. I personally, everything I'm talking about, I've done personally. I still do personally. If there's anything I don't work with people that I don't practice myself. And then I said the second thing we need to do is once we get clear on who you are and what you want, and I kind of look at 4 areas of your life, is your career, your finances, your relationships, and you as a person. Everything kind of falls underneath that. And so what we do is we find out what is preventing you from getting what you want. And the program I used was an analogy, was like a GPS system. I said, if you have a GPS system, the first thing it asks you, where do you want to go? Well, that's getting clear on where do you want to go. And the second thing it asks you is, where are you? And that's determining where are you in your life right now. If you're getting what you want, getting what you don't want. So then what we do is we map, what it does is it maps out a route. I said, why don't you do that with your life? So the second thing we do is, after getting clear on what you want, we really look at, and this is kind of a morning exercise. It's a very emotional experience. But what interesting thing is, I've yet to meet anyone, including myself, that knows how they're programmed. And that has probably been one of the most revealing things to me, and just fascinates me. I don't care how intelligent you are. I've worked with people that are academically intelligent. Think that maybe they might know something you don't, but they don't. It's no different. So I think that, people, when we compare ourselves to others, is it doesn't matter your level of academia, although that could play a role. And then when we find out how you're programmed, again, that's a very emotional experience. And we dig deep into that to find out what that means. Essentially, it's a belief system. And so I look at it from 2 ways: your thought processes and your emotional processes, because thoughts and emotions it's all energy, but we don't think of that. Often toss around the word mindset. And mindset is a great word, but I don't always know what people mean by that. I mean, I think it's their thoughts and their beliefs. But I said, if you don't understand, if you have that alone, you're not going to succeed very long. Because
you need some of the basics that, energy follows thought.
Yeah. I mean,
and thoughts and emotions have energy and mass.
Right. Yeah. And energy is everything. So when we look at that, once we learn how you're programmed, to get into the emotional component of that, because really thoughts are your mind, and feelings are your body. So we need to combine those 2 together and understand how that works. And what that does is that really releases a lot of energy for you to focus on your purpose, why you're here, why you do things, and then prosperity. Because I think what happens is people work it backwards, where they try to understand prosperity without understanding how they are the big component of that. So it's a fascinating time. It's a fun time. It's emotional, but I would have to say it's life-changing. It's been life-changing for me, for the people I work with. And I think I've studied with some wonderful people and then implemented a lot of what I talk about.
And it's so nice and refreshing to hear other people talking about energy, because it's the levels of it being understood for people. It's like, some people think energy, it's like, oh, that's just your electricity and your gas. And it's like, yes, but also it's everything.
You're right. That's the perfect point. I said everything is energy. And when people talk about, the one thing that I think I've learned more is, we all talk about time is the most important thing. And I think it's energy. Because we all have 24 hours. We know that. But what happens in those 24 hours?
It's energy management, not time management.
Well, yeah, it's energy awareness, energy. So I think there's a number of different techniques I use with people and myself to get energy and get focus. Because I think once you understand that, you grasp that concept, then I think everything changes. Because there are basically 2 things we have. We have a desire and a belief. We have a desire, but it's shot down by a belief. So we have to look at what that is and why that's happening.
And then change the belief.
Yeah, oftentimes I ask people, why do you want to do this? Well, we're getting back to your topic of freedom, which I think is a very good one. They said, well, I want money because I want freedom, and I want a relationship, or I want this, I want whatever because of freedom. I said, freedom from what? What does that mean? And what happens is there's two ways to look at it. What I sometimes hear, well, I want freedom. I don't want this job anyhow. It's freedom from the unwanted. It's freedom from the bondage. It's freedom of the stuff which is not going to get you what you want. You don't go from that perspective and talk about freedom as, what do I want to create? What do I want? What do I want to manifest? What do I want to see my life as? So you can look at it two ways. But if you're going to be right, well, if you're going to be going from a freedom of unwanted, then what happens is you're going to manifest the unwanted, because you still have that in your vibration. So I think it's an important concept to really identify. When people talk to me about freedom, I go, let's talk more specifically about what that means for you. So if I say, oh, I want the freedom to go wherever I want, whenever I want to do it. I want the freedom to buy whatever I want. I want the freedom to be whoever I want, to actually do the things I love to do, not consider it necessarily work, just a natural extension of who I am. And that's a different topic.
Mm-hmm. And that's where more I look at freedom, because I come from the base, it's like, it's so nice having all the thoughts in your head just be quiet and peaceful. So you can choose to think about what you want to think about and focus on your visions and goals. I know a lot of mine with the New Atlantis project and building floating islands so we can actually have a free country, because most of them are descending down into tyranny now.
Yeah, I think that, I think because the world is changing, and I think maybe at a faster pace, particularly as technology advances, it's going to change even more. And the two never were able to live together really well, technology and human nature. I don't know they keep up with each other. And we're seeing a lot of that with social media and those kinds of things. There's a lot of things that are occurring in the human body and experience that shows that that's the but I think because to better be able to deal with whatever is in your external world, you have to start with what's in your internal world. And if you don't understand that, so what I go back to, I just want to go back to how that works with people is, once you identify and get clear on what you want, and also we look at what you don't want. That's another topic which is really interesting as well. But then we do is we look at what your programs are. What are your belief systems? How long has this been going on? What is this? We dive into that, and that oftentimes there's an initial awareness, and then what happens is, what I've noticed is you sometimes have to work a little bit on that, but there's different ways of doing that. I think a lot of times people don't know how powerful the mind is and how to use it. And there really is, I don't think we were ever given a guidebook on that very well. But a way around that simply is, I work with people, we do alpha consciousness, alpha meditation. They go, what is that? I said, something new. I says, no, you have it every day. You just have no idea.
I agree. And the guidebook, like, I wish there would have been stuff like this when I was a kid, but that's why I wrote my first book. The blur back on right. Alchemy, the Master's Path, that is using everything from the cutting edge neuroscience on how we can reprogram our brains. And like, if we teach our children how to think instead of what to think, oh my God, the potential with just one generation is amazing.
Well, that's a good point. The initial 7 years of life is when we're programmed in what we refer to with the theta type of consciousness, and that's simply there's four consciousness. There's alpha, beta, there's theta, and there's delta. Delta is the sleep one. So what you can do is you can access to change your mind, your behavior, your life experience by using these states of consciousness. You go through them every day. And most people aren't aware how to use them. So, again, the first thing was clearing your mind. The second thing was looking at how your programs are, your belief systems are. And the third thing is rewiring the mind. That's what I refer to as the rewired mind. And what is that? That is rewriting your map of reality to get you what you want and the plan to do that. So oftentimes what I see people experience in their life, and me as well, there's a lot of information, but not much transformation. We go to more conversations, we go to talks, we go to weekend retreats, and they're wonderful. There's a lot of good feeling comes out of that. You meet some nice people, and you come home within 24, 48, 72 hours, you're back in the old systems because you have not identified what the program is and changed it. And I think that's one of the challenges a lot of people have, because if you don't do it, you're just going to sabotage yourself. I mean, over and over again. I've had personal experience with that. I'm sure you probably have as well. We all
Oh,
have.
absolutely. We all do some self-sabotage, and that's where, like, okay, for a weekend seminar, you can learn what your beliefs are, you can figure out what you need to reprogram, and even create the habits to change a program. But if you don't continue doing that after the seminar, to actually give that time to ingrain in your brain, the way I talk about it in the book, it's like you have a path through the grass in the woods. It's wore down. You're going to go that path every time because it's easier to get through. And then you think of a shortcut, you go this way. It's like, oh, that was faster. That was a little bit better. You do it a couple times, you forget about it the next day and you go back to the old path. No, you got to go over that same path until it's wore down like the other one. And then that other one will start to grow weeds and stuff to like make it disappear over time.
Right. What is you're creating neural pathways. And one of the big reasons I see people fail, and myself is included, and I had to fix this because I was going to hundreds, countless numbers of informational days and weeks, you name the place, all over the world. And what happened was I was feeling really good and learning some wonderful information, but nothing would change. And after a certain point in time, I thought, this isn't working for me. And I think it's probably got to be frustration for a number of other people. So the kinds of things I work in my program, I have the 1-day workshop and 8-week program is, if you're looking for information, don't come to this. If you're looking for transformation, now we're talking. Because when you go through these processes, you're going to be a different person. And you have to be a different person because part of changing is changing identity. You have to change how you see yourself. And I think when we talk about mindset, we talk about changing our belief system, that's great. But if it's not connected to my changing my identity to who I am, because your personality is really your personal reality.
Well, that's what they mean by born again. This is one, with the Christians, it's like they don't understand their own books. Because what Jesus was talking about when he's talking about born again, it was being born again of a new thought, a new way. You have to like lay down, completely abolish the old way you used to live and go with the new thought of what you want to achieve.
No, that's true. I think it's said clearly in religion, in the Bible, and it's also in philosophies. You have to get rid of the old man, create the new man, or the old woman, create the new woman. And what happens is once you understand how to do that, so how that works simply is you have to get clear on changing your whole map of reality. And that's what we do. And then you have to have a plan, because that's all well and good, doesn't do anything. More information. So you're gonna have, all this stuff is gonna have another shelf life. I mean, just down there.
Well, that's why I was so frustrated when The Secret first came out, because I've always been into universal law, metaphysics, studying, the religion and philosophy, and like you get this is like, oh, genie in a bottle, just think about what you want. Well, just in there meditating doing nothing's not going to bring you anything. You have to take action. Thought ends in action.
Well, that's true. You have to take action. But what happens is, and what I used to do a lot of the time is I used to take massive amounts of action and do these sorts of things until I understand that if I clean up my vibration first, because going back to what we talked about, we are energy. If you focus on your energy and you focus on your higher vibrations, what you want, and we can get into negative and positive emotions, how positive emotions are focusing in a higher energetic, you're going to attract more of that. So what that means is once I connect to a higher vibration, and how I do this, basically how I start my day is the most important thing. Then what happens as a result of that, the inspirations, the synchronicities, the opportunities, these kinds of things start showing up. The thoughts that come out of nowhere. That's not a thought you're thinking. This just comes out of nowhere. I have these on a regular basis. I think when I work with people, I say, if you want to make these changes, and everybody wants to say, well, I want more money, I want a new relationship, some of these, and that's all wonderful. And they think that they're very far-fetched. Well, they're far-fetched if you can't create the little things, if you can't create subtle things in your life. And you have a plan to do that. So I just want to make sure I was clear on that. Once we have a plan, what that simply means is, what is your new roadmap? And that means we're going to change what you do in the course of your day. What you're going to do in the course of your day, starting from the beginning in the morning, is when you really need to set the tone, because sleep kind of puts you in you come out of delta and you're going back into, and you're putting new hormones. You're going from serotonin and melatonin into serotonin, getting your body awakened again. And at that point, before the thought process comes in, typically why that's so important is because the first thing what we do is when we wake up, what do? We go to our cell phone, we look at our cell phone, we look at the text, we look at the problem we had yesterday that we start thinking about again today. And that person I need to deal with, that challenge I need to deal with, something that comes out of lack and despair and missing. And what happens is that sets the brain into going in the wrong direction.
I agree 100%. Like right before bed and right as we're waking up, the subconscious mind is the most open. What you're putting into it gets ingrained the deepest. That's why my first thought every morning before I've opened my eyes is like, thank you, Creator, for another day. Thank you, Lord, for another day. Starting out with gratitude and then figure out something else to be grateful for. So you've set your hormones right. And then even if you mess up everything else the whole day, you're still doing better than if you hadn't done that.
Yeah, what I suggest, that's a very, very good that you do that. What I suggest was people wake, you're really coming out of a delta, and you're coming backwards, going from delta into theta, and then you're going to go into the other phases. So while you're still in that waking, almost hypnagogic, I think we refer to as sleep pattern, is I work with, there's a number of affirmations, and affirmations, when they're used correctly, work. Many people don't use them correctly. That's why they don't work. I mean, it's a common thought. I mean, you go everywhere you talk about affirmations are talked about everywhere. And I'm saying the reason an affirmation can only work is if it's ingrained in the subconscious mind. It becomes a new neural pathway. And how you're going to do that in the morning is a good time, because I just have like 10 affirmations I say every morning while I'm still waking up. And then I get into some gratitude. And before I want to get into the phone or what's going to be the problem of the day or the flavor of the day, which is going to set you into a different direction, I get into 20 minutes of quiet time. And what that simply does is it stops resistant thought. Now, here all the time is, in fact, I hear about, not all the time, but 99.99%. I can't meditate, Rick. I can't do this. My mind is too busy. I can't sit still. I can't. I said, well, already right there, you have the belief system. It's not going to work. So we work on that too. And believe me, I don't care who you are that you can't do it. Well, I'll work with you, and I guarantee you are going to learn how to quiet your mind. And there's still a misperception of that. We think, oh, that's the secret. It's the beginning of stopping of all the stuff that's going on and allow an inspired thought to come. Now, the inspired thought could have nothing to do with anything. And that's what the beauty of understanding what the universe does is they're always giving us signs and clues all the time. I mean, I use silly, and this is a true story. I was listening to something yesterday, and this is a true story. I said, you know what? I just want to, they said, start with something simple. I said, yeah, there's something that I want that I don't have, but I want to see if I can manifest something else. So they were talking about bizarre different things. And I said, you know what? I'd like to see a blue butterfly within the next 24 hours. Now, how bizarre is that? I mean, it doesn't make any, what does that have to do with anything? That's the point. What does it have to do with anything? An hour before I got on here, I had the TV on listening to music, and there were blue butterflies flying across the screen. I had totally forgotten about that. I said 24 hours, and that 24 hours would be at some point later this afternoon, about 4 or 5 o'clock. So my point is, if you can understand how to do these, something as simple and doesn't make any sense at all. And that's, again, because what happens is when I'm thinking of a big thing, I've got all this energy and all this thought, and the desire comes in, but so do the bad beliefs. I don't have a bad belief about a blue butterfly. I never even think of it. It's irrelevant. I'm sure probably to most everybody listening to this is going to say the same thing. But if you can start doing that and understand how that works, then what you really are looking for at a much higher level, all the money, the job, the person, whatever, the opportunities are going to show up in what you can imagine.
Well, you just described a really good way of what prayer really is. You have to just envelop, see it as happens, and then be detached and let go of the outcome.
Right.
And it's very hard to like concentrate and let go on things you actually care about. That's why you start with those things that are simple and it doesn't matter. And eventually it just changes, because you might just think, oh, I want a pink Lamborghini to come into my driveway in the next hour. and they offer you to buy your house or something weird. And the weird things that happen as we develop our minds and understand the concept of resonance. Just like with a guitar, you strike the chord on one, and the guitar right beside it, the same chord's going to ring.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think that's one of the things that I work with people. I say, when you're talking about rewiring your mind, you have to look at how you can start doing this. And the one thing that is a big challenge for many people when they're pretty much everybody, myself included, is when we're looking at something, we have that desire and that belief comes in. Once we work on changing that belief, it's a practice of doing that and an awareness of doing that consciously. So we're working with the conscious, subconscious together simultaneously on how to make those changes until we can instill a new neural pathway. And you're going to know what's going to happen but one of the things that I focus on when we're asking for something in life, we use an affirmation, we create this vision, which actually more than even an affirmation is the assumption that it already is here. I think there's Neville Goddard, he does a beautiful job of talking about the law of assumption, where I imagine that it's already here and I feel it from a thought and energy process. But the point is, here's where a lot of people get tripped up, is we don't see it happening. And so what happens is we revert back to, well, it's not here yet. So we look at our 3D world, we look what is around it, and it's pretty compelling, because the 3D world is showing us what we've already manifested. So what you're looking at right now is already manifested. And you could change it. But since you don't see it here, we get frustrated and we sabotage the very thing we want by going down the rabbit hole of that bad belief. So what I tell people is you have to be aware of, we talk about how to become aware of your thoughts going on and allow, and this is the important part people want to get, you have to allow it to come in its own way, in its own time. Everything has a gestation period. People don't, something just doesn't happen and it just happens. Everything has just gestation, even birthing, having a baby. I mean, it takes 9 months. You don't go and say, is the baby here yet? 2 months later, it just doesn't make sense. When you're planting a seed,
the sowing and reaping.
Nowhere people have a garden. It's like you don't go to the ground on earth and say, are you coming up yet? Are you working yet? What we do is we have this trust and allowing that it's going to happen. And then what happens in almost all the time, it happens this way. It's not consciously how we're going to expect something to happen. It doesn't happen that way. And so what you do is, once you become aware, this is where we work with becoming a conscious awareness of how to recognize what's going on into the opportunities and the inspirations and the thoughts that are going to show up in your life. And what happens, they're not going to show up in the way you often think it is. You've got to let go of the control of that. But since we're controlling beings, we like to think we want to control everything.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, you are not now, nor have you ever been, nor will you ever be in control of the external reality. The only thing you can regulate is your own thoughts and internal, which will have an influence on the external.
And that's exactly what it is. It comes back to how I'm going to create a new identity. Is I'm going to focus on creating this new map of reality. I have a new belief system now that I'm ingraining. I'm creating new neural pathways. And what's going to happen is the universe is going to show me on a regular basis opportunities that will show up. And there's a number of different techniques I work with people along the way to get that, which are really fascinating. And they work very, very well. And because what I hear a lot of the times is as you're starting this work, you're going to revert back to the old way of doing things pretty quickly. Because this is part of not having a plan. If you have the plan, you have the community, this isn't going to happen very easily.
The accountability is huge.
Well, that's exactly it. You've got to be accountable. And if you have a daily plan of what you're doing every day, it kind of makes a lot more sense. And then if you have people that you're working with that can reinforce that type. So it's the type of people you connect yourself to, the community you're with. I'm very careful about the people I spend a lot of time with.
I agree. Me too.
Right, same thing. Because sometimes you meet people and they're very, very nice, but their energy is just totally off. It's not helping. They're complaining and negative about their life and the world and everything. And I thought, well, how's that working for you?
That's actually what I found really fascinating is as I've got more into the sales and the real estate communities, the majority of people are working on changing the way they think. They're working on developing new skills and things like that. So they're much more open to growth than what you run into in the general community.
No, you're right. One of the interesting things about working with entrepreneurs is, and being within the real estate world, when I would often go to real estate meetings and talk about this, somehow the topic of personal development mindset always pops up somehow. And as I start talking about it, and I said, well, you guys have to understand, I've probably been working with that for 30 years. So I have maybe a little bit different take on it, and just personal experience. It's just not conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I realized that so many people in the entrepreneurial world, and I see real estate investors are a classic sign of that, is you're focusing on marketing strategies. We're focusing on what's the new thing. Is it AI going to do this thing? What's the new software program? What's the new CRM? What's the new strategy I'm working? Is it off market, on market? We're going to go on and on and on. How do I do it? And they're all wonderful and necessary. But if you don't, what happens is the strategy is only going to be as good as you.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I don't even know what the strategy is. One of the things I did is a technique I used was on clarification of how, it's actually a Jose Silva technique, where you create a mental movie.
Silva method, yes.
Yeah, how you see yourself, your world now, and then how you want to see it. And then what happens is, what this technique is about is when I don't have the answer to what I want, I used to just do 100 different things. Let me do this. Let me do that. Let me try this. And I don't do that anymore. I just stop and say, I don't have the answer to this, but the answer exists. So as I'm going through meditation, sometimes it pops up through that. But through this exercise, what it does is I turn it over just before I go to sleep, just before I go into Delta, to higher intelligence. And what happens is that's exactly where it should go. Because what's happening is you're not having, the point is, the more we try to figure it out, the more you get into, there's actually a loop I show people as how you get into the loop of, I'm trying to figure it out, it doesn't work, and I work harder, and it goes round and round, and you go in circles, and it's pretty exhausting. So if you let go of that and say, the answer is here just because I don't know it, and what happens is the answers and information, things just show up. It's just, it's an amazing thing.
Well, and you did great. I love how connected we are on this, because I was just thinking, it's like, okay, we talked about your morning routine, and I had mentioned earlier the first waking up and when going to bed is when the most times. So I wonder if you're going to talk about the nighttime. So saying, asking your questions so your subconscious mind can process it all night, which is faster than any supercomputer on the planet.
Well, it's going to be more effective too. And I think that what we don't train ourselves to do that. What we train ourselves to do, and the word I don't like pretty much, is the word struggle. I remember working with a patient one time, and we sat down for an hour interview, and I counted after a while, I just started making a check mark. And during the 30, 45 minutes that we're going into this, she said the word struggle 14 times. And she was wondering why she wasn't getting where she wanted to be. And I said, do you have any idea how many times, do you have any idea what are the most common words that you say in your conversation? She said, no, what is it? She had no idea. She said all the time. I was like thinking. So I just started making check marks. And so when we pointed out, we had the conversation, I said, you are, everything you do is going to be a struggle. Nothing is going to be easy. You're going to live your life with the brakes on. You're going to be just like going to be trying to run uphill, and you can do that. It's going to be very, very tiring, because that's why a lot of people that take an awful lot of action. And I just want to stress this point too. You can accomplish things. I used to pay a lot of attention to the hardcore motivational, I need to work super hard all the time. And there's nothing wrong with spending a lot of time in action. Absolutely. But it gets very exhausting when I have to push against something. And you can succeed. It's just very stressful.
Well, exactly. And like personally, I've had my own burnouts from trying to do that hustle culture. Right? It's like, no, you need, with the thought ends in action, it needs to be a divinely inspired action. Like you might just think of, oh, this friend, and, you turn on your phone, you call them, and it's like, oh yeah, I was just thinking about you. And I wanted to connect you with this person who's just the key to the puzzle. You need to buy this piece of property or do this little thing over here for your business, and it just flows. But you have to be in that detached and just joyful state to let it flow back and forth.
And flow, that's good. How flow happens and how you know is when you are in alignment with what you want, meaning the higher vibrations of what you want. So if I'm focused on what I want, and I'm focused in the vibration of what I want, I show you how to do this. And then you allow the gestation period to happen in its own way and pay attention to the clues and the signs and the synchronicities that are going to show up. I guarantee they're going to be there. I know I do this. And it still astounds me sometimes of where did this come from? It comes from the unusual places and unusual ways. But what I do is I let go of how it's going to happen more and more and let it happen in its own way. And when you learn how to do that, it's actually, I refer to people, I said, the way you got the way you are right now, if you think of it, how did you get the way you are right now? If you're not happy with what you are, most people in some area of their life are not happy. I said, well, let's think of it. There's a formula on how you did that. And if you could learn, rather than get into, we went into some of the parts of it right now, but if you could understand the formula of how you got the way you are, meaning how you created your personality, your identity, and your belief system, wouldn't it be great to use the same tools and principles to make the change? So what the most important thing is the formula to do it, and you can apply it to anything. And that's what took me a long time to finally register and think, wow, if I understand this, I can apply it to anything and it will show up. And the only thing that's going to stop it from showing up is my resistance to that with my limited belief that's still active.
So this formula you're talking about,
right?
How do you have like an acronym you set up for it to make it easier to remember for yourself? Or
yeah, the rewired mind. That's what I talked about. I said, if you understand what the whole concept of this, when I talk about the program, comes down to this. Because again, when I refer to the GPS analogy, is first let's get clear on where you want to go. You got to really know that. Then you really,
vision.
Yeah, you really got to know what that is, and we'll work on that because oftentimes people say, well, I'm not sure this is exactly what I want. And that comes from a couple of places. One, not being able to make a decision, something I just don't feel comfortable about myself. I don't feel confident. So right away, I'm going to see what's going on with you right now. We're going to point that out. We're going to change. We're going to get rid of that. We're going to rewire that. But let's get clear on what you want. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's going to change anyway. Then let's look at what you are. Let's look at how you are wired right now. What is your program? And then let's map out a different route to change. And on that route, what we're going to do is we're going to change your belief system, your identity, and your personality. You are going to be a different person because you have to be. I had one client come to me once. She was having problems in a relationship, and she said, man, I just don't know what to do to change. He's not willing to do anything to change. And she goes, is there anything I could do? I said, do you think you can make him change? She said, no. I said, I agree. I said, there is one way you can make him change. And she said, how? I said, you change. I said, when you change, they have to respond differently to you. You're not the same person. So what we focused on, her becoming a new person, a new personality, a new identity. And it did an amazing, there was some really, really good results. She was very happy when she came back with some of the things that we went on. And it was applying some of the same techniques. So the formula comes back to understanding what your program is, how you're going to rewrite it, and how you're going to implement it in your daily practice and the community you're going to be revolving around to keep reinforcing this idea. And there's going to be daily things you do. And that is actually one of the things that has worked best for me. There's things that I do every day and don't do. Because you can come back into it again. I can't stress this enough that the world that we see right now around us, what I keep referring to as the 3D world, it's showing us what we have right now, and we think that that's what the future is. Now, that's what the past was created now. If you don't like
this is the dream world.
Yeah. I mean, if you like it, it's fine. And there's a lot of things that are working for me. So, you know what? I'm really happy with this. I said, well, fine, don't change it. Don't have to change everything. Sometimes people will say, I want to change one area of my life or two or three areas of my life. And I remember working with somebody at one point and they said, can I just get a makeover? And I said, are you referring? Because I want to change everything. I mean, like everything. Nothing's really working really that well. It's kind of okay. And oftentimes people will go with okay. I mean, we'll often go through life with things tolerated, not
Mhm.
enjoyed. Because there's two reasons people change. Only two. One is from desperation. We have something bad happen. We lose a job. There's a diagnosis. There's some ill.
Mhm.
Something happens financially. So what happens is it puts us in a different position. And when that moment of truth, some people refer to in recovering communities as rock bottom. When you hit those places, you're going to change. The other way is through inspiration, where your awareness is, I want, like for an entrepreneur, I really want to create some life. Things are going okay. I'm getting some successes, not a lot, but I really want to create something different. What can I do? And I said, there's the opportunity. This is great. You're coming from an inspired place.
Mhm.
And once we can identify the inspiration in there, as far as the desperation, don't wait till you get there. And some people still have to. But then from both places, you can have amazing change. But then there's this middle road where a lot of people are living, where things are just okay. And they have moments, I want to change, but I don't.
Yeah,
So
nothing gets good or bad enough, and they just kind of float along.
yeah, it's just, yeah, we accept, we tolerate the reality we have right now, because sometimes we think that that's the best that we can have. And there's how often have you heard this saying, well, I'll just see what happens.
Mhm.
And that's a very disempowering sentence and thought to have. I'll see what happens. I don't wait for that. See what happens. What does that mean? I don't know what that means. That means I'm giving my power to everybody else in my external world for everything. And
Mhm.
once I do that, the ship is sunk. You're not going to get anywhere.
That's when you're a mindless drone. That's when you get to the sheeple level.
Yeah, and for some people, that's okay. And I'm not saying that there's anything that's not good about working for someone. There's an awful lot of wonderful things about working for someone. Not everybody has to be an entrepreneur, and if you work in the great environment as a team, working for someone is a wonderful experience.
Oh yeah.
But I'm speaking to people who are either not in that position or who are an entrepreneur or want to be an entrepreneur. And I'll say the number one thing you could work on if you want to be an entrepreneur or if you want to change anything is you. I don't keep the educational part is important. Relationships are important. But the number one thing is that you have to work on is you, and you have to identify who you are, what you want. And once you create that new rewired mind kind of thing, it's pretty much unstoppable. It's just a matter of time. And the only
Anything
way,
is possible.
right, anything is possible. The only way you're going to do it is if you get in your own way. And then there's an awareness on how to learn, how to know when that is.
Mhm.
I talked to a woman the other day. We were working on the phone, and she said to me, I could feel a very, very, there was a very low energy emotion coming through. And I pointed it out after a while. I said, do you hear how you sound? She wasn't totally aware. So we talked a little bit about that there was a depressive quality to it. And I actually was wondering where, I didn't get into the clinical part of it because that wasn't necessary. But I said, I just want to point this kind of thing out. And she said, well, I just don't know where to start. I'm having some success, but I just don't know where I'm going with this. And I said, well, the first thing you need to do is you have to have your level of awareness up right away about where you are, what you want to do. And then we need to make the changes. But this was a person who wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I'm not sure. And I oftentimes ask people, I say, why do you want to be an entrepreneur? Why do you want this? And Jedi, this is the most common response I get is a reason, not a why. I remember actually at a real estate seminar, I was thinking about this morning. I was at a real estate seminar and one of the guys came up presenting. He had some strategy on how he was doing things, and he was somewhat successful at what he was doing. And I was listening to him in the audience, I said, this may be one of the most miserable sounding unhappy speakers that I've heard in a while. And then he put up the word why. And I thought, oh, this is going to be good, because I really want to hear why is he doing what he's doing. And this was actually, he put up in words. This was this was probably a few hundred people in this room. His reason was, I don't want to be like my father. I was stunned when I was actually reading the words. I don't want to be like my father. And I thought to myself, you exactly are like your father. And when I talked to him later, I mean, this was a very, very unhappy person. There was clearly a depressive, anxious quality to him in the conversation. And I felt like much of his life must be efforting all the time. And it was, because he's spending a lot of time, he was working very, very hard. But the point was, I said, I didn't say anything to him because I didn't want to come across that way. But I thought he really need to identify that his why comes from a deeper place. I mean, I want to do this for my husband or my wife or my family. Wonderful reasons, all very good, but you got to go a little bit deeper than that, because the reason is, if you don't connect with that on a deeper level, you're going to be thrown roadblocks as you go through and on to become an entrepreneur, all the kinds of things you have to do that are going to knock you down and probably out. So if you are connected to a deeper thing, that's just going to be another blip in the road rather than a stop sign and a roadblock where you can't go past. So, I come across this on a regular basis, and it's common human nature, actually. So if that makes sense.
It makes total sense. I just kind of chuckle because being raised like the Native American, going through the traditional vision quest, like I've always had the vision for the new Atlantis, and everything else is like this guiding light through my whole life. No matter how good or bad things are, it's like you still keep moving, pointing your vessel where you want to go, follow the stars, listen to the signs. But that's the way the whole culture was raised. We felt everybody had a purpose, everybody had a mission in life, no matter how big or small that might be.
We're raised the way we're raised, and oftentimes dysfunction perpetuates itself. I mean, it clearly does. I mean, and when you look at how most everyone was raised, we weren't raised in many people. I remember when I was doing my clinical work, I was having some conversations with a mentor, and I said, the one thing that I don't quite understand is this was very, very early on, is I said, how many individuals are actually come from a healthy, functional environment? He said, a few percent. I said, really? He said, yeah. If you look at most people don't come from healthy environments, because what happens is we pass that on. We pass on that belief system, the behaviors, the patterns, and all these sorts of things. And sometimes we break out of it, and sometimes we work very, very hard at things and have success that way. And you can, and a number of people, I know people that do that. And I hear the words overwhelmed, swamped, I'm tired, I've got so much going on, I'm too busy, I don't have time. I mean, how many times have you heard that? And I'm saying, that's kind of counterproductive. I mean, yeah, you're successful at what cost?
Yeah, and I personally love my life. I get to, wake up to the love of my life every morning, spend time with her. We do business together. So I'm not sacrificing the relationship to build wealth.
Right.
But at the same time, we're still building wealth together.
Yeah. And I always ask people, what does that mean? Well, I mean, I often will hear the words, well, I want to be a multimillionaire. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a fantastic goal. But that's not what you're really looking for. I mean, everything we do, every single thing we do is for the feeling good of having it, period. And so what is that for you? I said, what is that for you? For some people, it may be a few hundred, 100, 200,000 a year. For some people, it may be 200 million a year, and that may not be enough. It doesn't matter what it is. The point is what is it for you? And don't use someone else's guidebook on how you should live your life, or what you think, how you define your success. And we oftentimes do that. We don't break free. We say, well, finally, I'm not living with my parents or my family, I'll be free. No, you're not. You took them with you. And what happens is, once you recognize, if you don't like that, how to change that. But the first thing it all comes down to is, anytime I talk to anybody, says, we got to raise your level of awareness. to everything right now. We're going to work on how you do that. And going back to the one question, she said, how do I know? This woman I was talking on the phone that had this was frustrated. She's an entrepreneur. She said, how do I know that if it's working or not working? And I said, you mean you don't know that? She said, no. I said, well, here's one clue. How are you feeling and what's showing up?
Mm-hmm.
Pay attention to what's showing up in your life and write it down. Write down everything that's occurring in your life right now, everything you have, everything that's happening to you, and pay attention to your feelings. Because when I pointed out that her energy, her level of energy was very low, I thought that she was also very busy, tired,
Mm-hmm.
just felt over a feeling of overwhelmment. And I thought, and the interesting thing is, when we're in the middle of this, I don't care how intelligent we are, because most everybody in the world's intelligent. It has to come down to the awareness. I have this with myself. There's people that will point out things to me at times that I'm saying, oh, wait. And maybe I have awareness, but not high enough awareness, but pretty much I've trained myself to be aware of myself. I work on myself more every day than anything else I do.
Amen. And the awareness, that's one I used to do when I still work 9-to-5 jobs, is I would set an alarm on my watch or phone every hour.
Right.
Do a mental emotional check. Like, how do I feel right now in my body? Is there any tension? Is whatever? And then what's going on around me at that time? What am I doing? What am I thinking? And then, you do that for a couple of weeks and you'll see it's like, oh, at this time, this type of thing, I do this or think this and this happens. And you start to figure it out little by little.
If you do a mental check on your day, and even at the end of the day, if you have a day that just didn't unfold as you wanted it to, I would say the first thing to do is don't beat yourself up on it, because we're human. You're not going to have a perfect day. And the one thing that I have to just say this real quick is, the one thing that I think always concerns me is when people are talking about that. I didn't have a good day, or things weren't working out, or something was going on. And I said, what's your expectation? If your expectation is I'm going to be feeling good and happy all the time, that's not reality. And why it's not is, when we look at positive emotions and negative emotions, we really don't understand how they work. Negative emotions are actually survival emotions. They're here for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
They're here to protect us. Experiencing one and living one is a totally different planet. So if I feel frustrated about something, good. What that's telling me is I don't want this. I want something else. Living in the frustration, that's not good. That's not healthy, and that's not going to work. The contrast of what I want and what I don't want happens all the time. How do you know that? How do you know when you go to the restaurant what I want to eat? I eat everything. How do you know who you're going to go out with? Oh, I'd like everybody. I don't like everybody. I mean, it's just, the whole point is, if you don't have a signal on that. So if we didn't have fear, we'd walk in front of cars all the time. So what happens is those are built in to use, not to misuse and abuse. And so once I understood that, somebody will say, oh, that's your mindset. I go, no, that's just a moment of frustration telling me what I want and I don't want. I'm not going to stay there. I'm aware that I'm there, and I'm now know what I don't want. Okay, now I know what I want. And I move there. And once you learn how to do that, that's how life is. And actually, there's a lot of joy that, because how are you going to evolve? And if you don't filter out what I don't want and what I don't want along the way to my goal. Mm-hmm. So.
And I like that, using the frustration, your emotions as a key, to see where you're at, what you want, what you don't want. And it's a good thing. And you start to feel, you pay more attention to your energy, you get sensitive to the people around you, and then you start to feel when they're static and things that you don't even like, okay, that over there, we don't even want to go near that.
Right. Well, when I tell people, I said, you have a guidance system in you. I always like the analogy of you, because it makes so much sense. You have a guidance system in you. You don't use it. Use it for your car, but you don't use it for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And there, and you have to learn how to use it.
See, that's where us a little bit older people that still live before modern technology, having the good old compass, setting your heart to true north. And it's like, okay, does it feel right? Does it not feel right?
Right. And a guidance system does not mean you're going to go straight from point A to B in a straight line. Nothing's that linear. What happens is we're going to be going along the way, and the route is going to change. There's going to be detours. I mean, ask Siri. It's going to take you on, oh, this is the fastest route. This is another route. There's something going on here, there's something going on there. And once you learn how to use it, sometimes what I tell people is when you're going to a goal and you run into something which doesn't feel right, pay attention to the message. I've had this a number of times. The message is saying probably one of two things. I have a belief system that's still stuck. I need to change, or this needs to happen before I can achieve what I want, because the universe is testing you in a certain way. If I have a goal, then if you can't experience having this, you can't have this success of that. So if you want to be able to create anything in your life, I'm trying to think of some good, something may happen to you to just get you to stop for a moment and say, wait a second, okay, what is this teaching me right here? So I say, don't assign it a bad meaning. It doesn't feel good, and it's trying to. We've heard this before. It's a teaching moment. Life's trying to tell us something, and we brush that aside and go, wow, that's not. I don't want to hear that. Oh, I don't want to hear that. I want to hear something good. I said, no, pay attention to that, and can be that. For example, you may not be meant. For example, if you want to go out with somebody and you go out with somebody and you think this is going to be the perfect one and something doesn't work right, say something doesn't happen, it's not able, but what happens is that day or the next day or something else, another opportunity opens up, which is better. But if this didn't happen for you to get to that, you wouldn't know it. If this house deal didn't go through because another better one was supposed to happen and you weren't supposed to work with these people, that's a good thing, but not what is happening. So you just need to step back.
And that's the positivity trap people get into. They're like, put their blinders and ears on. It's like, I don't want to hear this good. And it's like, but if you don't bounce, you might miss your turn and go the other way.
Yeah, it's just a level of awareness, because life is actually the experience. It's like, I always like the analogies. If you're going on vacation and say you go on a cruise and you're going to Florida and you're going to go on a Caribbean cruise, and you say to the cruise director, say, well, you know what, where are we going to go when we end up? We're going to end up back in Miami. So we're leaving from Miami. We're going to end up in Miami. I said, yeah, well, why don't I just keep my stuff here? So this is where we're going to end up. And the director says, well, I thought you wanted to have the experience of the cruise. So that's the point. We said we don't say, wait a second, we don't know what's going to happen in that. There's going to be some things that are going to happen. Maybe something's not as pleasant we want, but it's the whole experience of doing something, not just getting from A to B. It's the journey, not the destination. And the journey is, people think when I get happy when I reach the destination. No, you don't. I'll show you won't, because we're creative, we create, we're creators, we're creating. So we have to understand that once we get that concept, where no matter whatever you achieve, and you see this in your life, I see this, whenever I achieve, I get something, I want something else. And that's the way life is. It's the evolution. And we never stop.
That's why, I was taught when I was younger to have a vision that is, so big, you're not going to achieve it in your lifetime or even 10 lifetimes.
Yeah, I mean, and you could or not. I mean, I just say, hey, you have a vision, create what you want, change your identity, change your personality. Let's work on making sure how to put a check in to know that that's actually happening. So you're not just getting all this information, no transformation. And what happens with that is you're going to see things evolve and change, and you're going to create things that you didn't even think possible a time before. Sometimes it's great to journal that, because you'll look back and you're going to say, was this my life? Some of the things that I've survived and thrived through, I look back and go, how was that possible?
Right? We're living on borrowed time, right?
Yeah. And once you learn the formula of how to do that, then you say, okay, I can apply this to everything. But at the time, there were times I didn't understand what was I doing. And that was I was unconscious that I was competent at something. And that's why you raise your consciousness of that. And then that's how you can make the change, once you understand it. So
There you go. Well, thank you, Rick. What's a good way for people to contact you, and any last piece of wisdom you'd like to share
Yeah.
with the audience?
My name is Rick. Last name is Kansa, Kansa. So it's rickkansa@gmail.com. I'll even leave my cell phone number. It's the easiest number in the world. It's 216-990-6000. It's a super easy cell phone. Yeah, I guess my last words, if you're looking to change anything in your life, then where you need to start is you need to get into a programmatic approach of not getting more information, but getting into something that's going to be transformation. And what that's going to be is an interactive approach where you work on yourself to use something like the Rewired Mind. You're going to get clear on what you want. You are going to look at where you are right now, what the belief systems and the programs that are keeping you from getting that. And then you're going to rewire that and then get a plan and a map on how to change it, how to monitor it daily, and how to connect with a community to do that. So what happens is over time, you're going to learn, put in new neural pathways, you're going to create a whole new belief system, and eventually you're going to create a new identity, a new personality. And when you see that happening, evolving, you're going to have some, wow, I can do that. So thanks for having me today. This was wonderful. It's good seeing you again.
Thank you, Rick, and thank you everybody for showing up. Make sure you like and subscribe. Check in with Rick if you want to change his mind rewiring program and build your communities. And the freedom starts with what's between your ears.
That's where it starts. Okay, thanks very much. I appreciate it.